My brothers, my sisters, my dear kindred spirits, come close. Let us sit together in the house of understanding, in the temple of song, in the sanctuary of poetry. For in this place we are bound not by the color of our skin, nor by the weight of our burdens, but by the music that moves through us and the poetry that gives our souls their wings. Music and poetry are not separate forces, but intertwined spirits, breathing together, moving together, shaping the world with sound and verse. They are the twin heartbeats of human expression, pulsing in harmony through the centuries, calling to one another across time and space. Every song holds within it the echoes of poetry, just as every poem carries a rhythm, a melody waiting to be heard. They are bound not by form but by feeling, not by structure but by soul. Long before the written word, before ink met parchment or paper, there was music, the beating of drums, the hum of a mother's lullaby, the chant of a people bound by hope and hardship. These sounds were not just noise, they were stories. They carry the weight of ancestors, the wisdom of elders, the yearning of hearts longing to be heard. In the same way, poetry has always been more than words arranged on a page. It is song made visible, a melody that dances even in silence. Poetry, like music, does not require translation to be felt. A whispered verse can move the spirit as deeply as the swell of a violin. A steady rhyme can stir the soul like the rise and fall of a gospel choir. In every culture, in every corner of the world, music and poetry rise together, shaping traditions, strengthening communities, reminding us of who we are. The griots of West Africa carried history in their voices, singing the past so that it would never be forgotten. Yet the blues, born from pain, turned sorrow into song, crafting poetry from hardship and hope. The spiritual sung in the fields carried the weight of suffering, but also the promise of freedom, their words soaring beyond chains, beyond oppression, beyond time itself. And even today, in the rhythm of rap, in the cadence of spoken word, in the lyricism of a ballad, poetry and music remain intertwined, breathing life into one another. They are not confined by instruments or page, by performance or print. They live in the everyday, in the way we speak, in the way we move. A heartbeat is a rhythm. A sigh is a lyric. The laughter of children, the rustling of leaves, the call of a street vendor. These are the raw, untamed melodies of life, waiting to be shaped into song, into verse. And when we listen closely, we find that music and poetry are not distant, lofty arts meant only for stages or libraries. They belong to us, to all of us. They are present in the hush of prayer, in the shout of protest, in the quiet hum of reflection. Through them we find connection, not just to each other, but to something greater. They remind us that we are part of a rhythm larger than ourselves, a chorus that stretches across generations. When we hear a song that moves us, when we read a poem that speaks the truth of our hearts, we recognize something familiar, something ancient, something eternal. We see ourselves in the words, in the notes, in the spaces between them. And in that recognition, we are no longer alone. We are part of the same song, the same poem, the same unbroken thread of human expression. Music and poetry speak in a language that needs no translation, a language older than borders, deeper than dialects, wider than any division humanity has ever known. They do not belong to one people, one place, or one time. They are carried on the wind, passed from heart to heart, finding a home wherever there are souls willing to listen. A song sung in one tongue can stir the heart of a listener who does not know the words, just as a poem written in a distant land can resonate with someone who has never walked the same streets or seen the same stars. They are woven into the human experience, transcending what separates us and reminding us of what we share. Long before history was recorded in books, it was sung. Ancient civilizations carved their stories not only in stone but into melody. into rhythm. The indigenous chants of the Americas, the folk songs of Eastern Europe, the desert poems of the Middle East, the intricate verse of Chinese dynasties, each of these speaks of the same truths: love and loss, struggle and triumph, longing and fulfillment. A shepherd in the hills of Spain hums a tune to his flock, and though a fisherman on the shores of Japan may never hear it, he too knows what it is to let music carry the weight of solitude. A poet in Nigeria sets her heart to paper, and though her reader in Brazil may not share her language, he feels the ache of her words in his chest. Music and poetry do not ask where we are from. They ask what we feel. They ask if we have ever wept at the sound of a familiar melody, if we have ever closed our eyes and let a line of verse pull something from deep inside us that we did not know was waiting to be set free. They do not care for the walls we build between ourselves, for the lines we draw on maps, for the names we give to differences. They slip through those barriers like sunlight through the cracks in a wall, like water shaping stone. A love song in French, a hymn in Zulu, a haiku in Japanese, a protest chant in Spanish. Each different, each unique, yet each carrying the same essence. They are vessels for human emotion, for human history, for the human soul. The pulse of a drum in an African village beats the same rhythm as the footsteps of a dancer in a New York studio. The sorrow in a country ballad echoes the lament of a flamenco singer in Andalusia. The words of a poet who lived centuries ago can rise again in the voice of a child discovering them for the first time, as if the past and present were always meant to meet in that moment. Even when words fail, when conversation stumbles, when understanding seems impossible, music and poetry remain. They find their way into places that politics cannot reach, into hearts that have been closed by fear or wounded by history. A violin can sing where voices are silenced. A poem can whisper truths that have been buried beneath years of conflict. They are the bridge across cultures, across generations, across every false boundary we have ever drawn between ourselves. They remind us, in their melody and their meter and their meaning, that we are not as different as we sometimes believe. They remind us that no matter the language we speak, we all know what it is to feel. And in that knowing, we are never truly alone. Music and poetry have long been the refuge of the unheard, the unshaken voices of those whom history has tried to forget. They rise from the depths of suffering and sing from the heights of joy, carrying the truths of those who have walked the hardest roads. When a people are stripped of their rights, when their stories are silenced, when their names are erased, music and poetry remain. They live in the whispers of the wind, in the rhythm of footsteps on a long journey, in the cries of a mother rocking her child to sleep in the midst of struggle. They are unbreakable, for they are not merely words or notes. They are the echoes of resilience. A song can hold a story that was never written in books. A poem can speak a history that was never taught in classrooms. The enslaved people who toiled beneath the sun found freedom in spirituals, their melodies carrying not only their suffering, but their unyielding hope. Their voices rose where their chains tried to keep them low. Their lyrics carried messages of escape, of endurance, of a faith that could not be stolen. The blues was born from that same sorrow, the deep wailing of a people who had been given little but still found a way to turn their pain into power. Poetry, too, has been the voice of those who would not be silenced. The words of Langston Hughes, of Maya Angelou, of Pablo Neruda, of countless others who refused to let their people's struggles be forgotten, stand as monuments to truth. When the world would not listen, poetry forced them to hear. When injustice stood tall, poetry cut it down, one verse at a time. A single stanza can hold more power than 1,000 speeches. A single line can shake the conscience of a generation. Music and poetry do not ask for permission. They do not wait for the world to be ready to hear them. They exist because they must. They are written in secret, whispered in the dark, passed from lips to lips, from heart to heart. They're smuggled across borders, etched into the walls of prison cells, scrawled onto scraps of paper and tucked away for the day when they can finally be spoken aloud. They belong to the oppressed, to the overlooked, to those whose voices tremble but never break. Even in times of peace, even in moments of celebration, music and poetry remind us of those who came before, those who fought, those who refused to disappear. They carry the names of ancestors, the lessons of elders, the warnings of history. A protest song does not fade when the march ends. It lingers in the air, in the minds of those who sang it, in the hearts of those who heard it. A poem does not die when the last word is read. It settles into the soul, waiting for the moment when it will be needed again. And it will always be needed again, because as long as there is injustice, there will be music that rises against it. As long as there is suffering, there will be poetry that refuses to let it go unseen. As long as there are people who have been silenced, there will be voices that find their way through melody, through rhyme, through the unstoppable force of truth. They cannot be buried, they cannot be erased. They are the heartbeat of every movement, the song of every struggle, the words of every story that refuses to be forgotten. From the beginning of time, music and poetry have walked beside us, shaping our journeys, defining our traditions, and giving voice to the stories that make us who we are. They are not separate from our lives. They are woven into the fabric of our existence, passed from generation to generation like heirlooms of the soul. No matter where we come from, no matter the language we speak, there is a rhythm in our history, a song in our ancestry, a poetry in our past. They are the echoes of those who came before, the breath of those who shaped the world with their words, their melodies, their unwavering spirit. Long before history was written in books, it was song. The indigenous tribes of the Americas used chants and drum beats to tell their stories, to honor their ancestors, to call upon the spirits of the land. Ancient civilizations inscribed their poetry on temple walls, in sacred texts, in the hushed prayers of their people. Music and poetry have never been mere entertainment. They have been the vessels of memory, the guardians of wisdom, the keepers of a people's identity. A culture without its songs, without its poetry, is a culture at risk of forgetting itself. The rhythm of a people's struggle, the melody of their victories, the poetry of their longing. All of these live in the art they create. The African American spirituals born in the darkness of oppression became the foundation of gospel, jazz, blues, and hip-hop, each generation adding its voice to the ongoing story. The sonnets of Shakespeare, the haikus of Japan, the spoken word of today's poets, all of these are proof that poetry does not die. It evolves, it transforms, it finds new ways to speak the same eternal truths. Music and poetry are not only shaped by tradition, they shape tradition in return. A child hears a song sung by their grandmother, and though they may not yet understand the meaning, the melody settles in their heart, waiting for the day when they will pass it on. A poem written centuries ago is read by a new voice, breathed into life once more, carried forward into the future. They're not relics of the past. They're living things, growing with us, changing with us, reminding us of who we have been and who we are becoming. They are also bridges, connecting generations that might otherwise struggle to understand one another. A father hears his daughter recite a poem that speaks of struggles he once faced but never put into words. A grandmother listens to her grandson's rap lyrics and recognizes in them the same fire that burned in the spirituals of her youth. Through music and poetry, the old and the young find common ground, find the echoes of their own stories in one another's voices. They are reminders that history is not just something that happened long ago. It is something that is still being written, still being sung, still being spoken into existence. No people, no culture, no generation is ever truly lost as long as their songs are still sung, as long as their poetry is still recited. They are the footprints left behind for us to follow, the guideposts that lead us back to ourselves when we are in danger of forgetting. They remind us that we are part of something larger than ourselves, a great and unbroken chain of voices stretching back through time, each one carrying a piece of the story forward. They are our inheritance, our birthright, our promise that though time may pass, though the world may change, the music and poetry of our ancestors will live on as long as we continue to listen, to sing, and to speak. Music and poetry have always been more than art forms. They are the medicine of the soul, the healing balm for wounds both seen and unseen. They hold the power to soothe a heart that aches, to lift a spirit weighed down by sorrow, to remind a weary traveler that they are not alone. In the darkest of nights, a song can be a light. A poem can be a hand reaching out. A verse can be the bridge that carries a broken soul back to wholeness. They do not ask for explanations, do not require logic or reason. They simply exist as proof that no matter how deep the pain, there is always something that can speak to it, something that can hold it, something that can help it begin to mend. Music and poetry have the power to comfort, but they also have the power to unite. A melody sung in harmony brings voices together, weaving them into a single sound, a single force. A poem spoken aloud to a crowd becomes a shared experience, a common thread binding strangers to one another. They do not need introductions, do not need permission. They simply enter the space between people and fill it with something deeper than words. In times of conflict, when division seems insurmountable, a song can cut through the noise of argument. A poem can remind us of our shared humanity. The moment a choir sings in unison, the moment an audience holds its breath at the end of a powerful stanza, something shifts. Barriers soften, differences fade, and what remains is the simple truth that we are all made of the same hopes, the same fears, the same longing to be understood. Even when spoken in different languages, music and poetry transcend the limitations of speech. A violin can weep where words fail. A drum beat can pulse in the chest of every listener, no matter where they come from. A love poem written centuries ago can make a modern reader's heart race as if it were written just for them. They speak in the language of emotion, in the universal dialect of the soul. They remind us that though we may walk different paths, we feel the same joys, the same sorrows, the same deep yearning for connection. They do not belong to any one people, any one place. They belong to us all, to the world, to every heart that has ever beaten in rhythm with another. The world is full of noise, of distractions, of voices speaking over one another, but music and poetry demand that we stop and listen. They ask us to be still, to be present, to truly hear. A single note held in the air can hush a crowded room. A whispered verse can command more attention than the loudest voice. In their stillness, in their simplicity, they create space for reflection, for understanding, for empathy. They teach us that listening is just as powerful as speaking, that sometimes the answers we seek are not found in explanations, but in the raw, unfiltered emotion of a song or the quiet wisdom of a well-placed word. When people feel lost, they turn to music. When they need hope, they find it in poetry. A national anthem unites a country in pride. A hymn offers solace to those in mourning. A protest song gives strength to a movement. A love poem brings two souls closer together. They are always there, waiting to be called upon, ready to remind us of what is important, of what is real, of what it means to be human. They do not force their lessons upon us, do not demand anything in return. They simply exist, offering their gifts to all who are willing to receive them, to all who are willing to let them in. And when we do, we are never the same again. There is something deep within the human spirit that refuses to be confined, refuses to be silenced, refuses to be diminished. It is the part of us that rises even when the weight of the world presses down, the part that sings, even when the night is long, the part that speaks, even when no one seems to be listening. It is the rhythm of resilience, the melody of perseverance, the poetry of a soul that knows it was meant for more. Music and poetry are not just expressions of feeling, they are declarations of existence, testaments to the fact that we are here, that we matter, that our voices deserve to be heard. From the moment a child takes their first breath, there is a rhythm to life, the steady beat of a heart, the rise and fall of breath, the cadence of footsteps moving forward. Life itself is music, and to deny its rhythm is to deny what makes us human. Poetry, too, is a reflection of this truth, taking the unspoken and shaping it into something real, something tangible, something that demands to be acknowledged. They call to the deepest parts of us, asking us not just to move through the world, but to rise within it, to take up space, to claim the power of our own voices. History has always been shaped by those who dared to rise, by those who refused to remain silent. Every movement for justice, every fight for freedom, every call for change has been carried on the wings of song and verse. The songs of the civil rights movement did not just provide comfort, they gave strength, they gave direction, they gave purpose. The poetry of those who spoke against oppression did not just describe suffering, it ignited revolutions, it opened eyes, it turned whispers into roars. To create, to express, to make something that speaks to the soul, this is not just art, it is action, it is defiance. It is defiance, it is the ultimate assertion that we are here and we will not be ignored. Even in moments of personal struggle, when the weight of the world feels too heavy to bear, music and poetry remind us that we are not alone. A song that carries the right words at the right time can lift a person from despair, can remind them that others have walked this path before and made it through to the other side. A poem can take the inexpressible and give it form, can turn grief into something that can be held, examined, understood. They teach us that even in our darkest moments, we are not without light, not without hope, and not without the power to stand once more. To rise is not always to shout. It is not always to march, to demand, to fight. Sometimes to rise is simply to keep going, to write one more line, to sing one more note, to hold on to one more moment of beauty in a world that often feels harsh. It is in the quiet persistence of creativity that we find the courage to continue, to reach for something greater, to believe that tomorrow holds something worth waiting for. The world may try to silence voices, but music and poetry remind us that silence is never permanent, that even the softest whisper can grow into a song that fills the sky. A poem written in solitude may one day be the words that give someone else the strength to carry on. A song sung in an empty room may one day be the anthem of a movement. The simple act of expression, of lifting one's voice in whatever way it can be lifted, is an act of resistance, an act of survival, an act of power. We were not born to remain unheard. We were not made to stay small. We were born to create, to express, to connect, to sing, to write, to speak. We were born to rise.